This is Mike Smith, welcome back to another Maya tutorial. This time we're going to explore animating with dynamics. You may have already looked at my previous tutorials on keyframing and the graph editor, so this tutorial is really the next step. Now, animating with dynamics means we can assign simple physics or gravity to different objects to make them react without keyframes. So, first of all, we need to set our menu set to dynamics, and if you've looked at the previous tutorial, you'll know we need to have our time slider and our range slider visible. If they're not there, go to display at the top of the screen, UI elements for user interface elements, and then tick whichever one is missing. Next, we need to set our playback speed in our animation preferences. The animation preferences are available in the bottom right corner of the screen. That's the white box with the red running character. Click on that and we can set playback speed to real-time 24 frames per second. Now, if after some practice you end up making a very complicated scene with lots of different dynamics, and if you find the playback is quite jumpy or laggy, we need to select play every frame. But for now, this is quite a simple demonstration, so we'll leave this on real-time 24 frames per second. Now we need to actually have about 10 seconds worth of frames available, so we can actually expand that to 240 frames. And now we can start assigning some different dynamics. So I want this object here, this cube, to actually fall and react with the floor. So select the cube, go up to soft and rigid bodies, and we're going to look at these two at the top here, active and passive rigid bodies. The object that's falling that you don't want to actually have any keyframes assigned to is generally your active rigid body. So select that, and now select the floor and create a passive rigid body. You'll find if we rewind and play the animation here, nothing much happens. So if I rewind and press play, nothing happens there because there's no gravity assigned. So if I stop and rewind the animation, it's very important to rewind each time just to reset everything. Now select your cube up here, the active rigid body, go up to fields, and there's all different fields here you can experiment with, but first we need to actually assign a gravity, so click on the option box, and here we've got two different settings. You've got magnitude 9.8. now that's 9.8 meters per second squared, that's real life gravity. Then we've got our X, Y and Z directions. You'll see that Y is set to -1. That means it's down. The force of the gravity is pulling down towards the floor. So again, that's real life. Click on create, and we can rewind and play the animation to see what happens. You'll find it will just drop and it will bounce. It doesn't really do much yet. If we stop and rewind that, if we rotate this to actually make it hit the floor maybe corner first rather than just completely flat, you'll see it will react a different way. So rotate that a bit, rewind and press play again, and you'll see it actually reacts a different way, and it can look quite realistic. Although I generally find if we play that again, it bounces too much. It can look a bit light. So make sure your active rigid body is selected. And if we have a look over in the attribute editor, you'll see there's a rigid body 1 tab. In there, there's all sorts of interesting attributes or settings you can play around with. The first one I'd look at is bounciness. The default setting for that is 0.6, but if we change that to 0.2, I find you get a more natural bounce out of an object. So if we rewind and play the animation again, you should find it looks more natural. It doesn't bounce too much, it settles quite quick. Okay, we can even rotate that a bit more to see what happens. Make sure you rewind every time and then press play. Okay, that's quite natural. Now I want to add another object here, and I want that object to actually move and push this one out of the way. So I'll create another simple object, just another cube, and I'm going to keyframe this object to actually move to occupy the same space as this first one once it drops. So first of all, we need to actually play that and see roughly when it settles. So rewind, press play, and that's settled around frame 80. So I can move this object from about frame 80. So keyframe that where it is there, and I want it to move not too quickly, maybe over about 1 second, so that's 24 frames. And I want to keyframe that to occupy the same space. Okay, now if I play that there, you'll find these two objects won't react. If I rewind and press play, you should see this one drop, settle, and then the new object just move over. If you want it to react, because we've already added keyframes, we can't use an active rigid body. Otherwise it will conflict with the keyframes. Instead we'll use another passive rigid body, just like the floor. So select this object, go back up to soft and rigid bodies and create a passive rigid body. Now rewind the animation again and press play. There we go. Really simple, but you can have quite a lot of fun with this. You can make all different creations. You can make some kind of machine if you like, and you can make different objects react completely independently to other ones. So make note of the settings you're using. Keep saving as you go along. Sometimes if you add too many dynamics, it can struggle if your computer's quite limited. So keep saving, keep practicing, try and learn something new.